What if I told you that what we call the pyramids are not silent relics of a bygone era, but active codes, still pulsing with frequencies we've long forgotten how to hear? That their shape is not a coincidence, their alignment not decorative, and their chambers not the resting place of any pharaoh, but something else entirely. You may have heard this before. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built as the tomb of Pharaoh Khufu. That's what the textbooks say. But here's the problem: no body was ever found. No inscriptions naming Khufu. No sarcophagus carved with funerary intent. Just an empty stone box in the king's chamber and an architecture that defies not only explanation, but even replication. Is that how we build tombs? Why then do these structures, some weighing up to 6 million tons, align with such surgical precision to the cardinal points? Why do their internal shafts point to specific stars, Sirius, Orion's belt, Thuban, with an accuracy our modern tools are only beginning to appreciate? What kind of tomb has vent shafts to the cosmos? It's not just Egypt. Across the earth, from Mesoamerica to China, ancient cultures built pyramidal structures, not to bury their dead, but to communicate with the sky, to harness something, to resonate. The builders weren't just stacking stones. They were tuning instruments. Recent studies by architectural physicists and engineers have shown that the Great Pyramid resonates at multiple acoustic frequencies. In 2018, researchers from the ITMO University in Russia and the Laserzentrum Hanover in Germany demonstrated that the pyramid can concentrate electromagnetic energy in its internal chambers. This isn't fringe theory, this is published science. The structure appears to act as a waveguide, subtly bending and amplifying electromagnetic fields, particularly in the radio and microwave bands. But this goes even deeper. The granite used in the king's chamber is not local. It's pink Aswan granite, a material rich in quartz crystal, known for its piezoelectric properties. It converts mechanical stress into electrical energy. Why bring this stone hundreds of kilometers for a simple burial? Unless the builders were exploiting its vibrational properties. The walls of that chamber aren't decorated. They're polished, smooth, designed not to be seen but to reflect not light but sound, tones, frequencies, like a giant tuning chamber, like a transducer between realms. What if these chambers weren't for the dead, but for activating the living? There's more. In ancient Sanskrit texts, the Vedas, there's mention of a vimana, a flying craft powered by mercury and sound. In Mesoamerican legends, the pyramids were said to sing when the wind moved through their stones. And the Egyptian priesthood? They preserved knowledge orally, vibrationally. Not everything was meant to be written. Some things were meant to be remembered in the body through resonance. None of this was superstition. It was science before science, a sacred science. What we now call metaphysics was, to them, practical physics. They built in alignment with the Earth's energy grid. They used sacred geometry not to decorate, but to activate. And when you stand inside the Great Pyramid, you don't feel like you're in a tomb. You feel like you're inside a machine, a living one. So if it's not a tomb, then what is it? In the next part, we'll look at the geometry of the pyramid as an energy device, and the theories that suggest it was once a global power generator, possibly even a wireless transmitter, long before Tesla dreamed of Wardenclyffe. But first, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, why does part of you already feel like you knew this? Imagine a geometry so precise, so ancient, that its ratios echo not only in architecture but in nature itself. The Great Pyramid is not merely symmetrical, it's a coded harmonic structure. Its base matches the golden ratio, its height corresponds to the radius of the Earth when scaled, and its perimeter reflects the circumference of the planet with startling accuracy. How did an ancient people, supposedly without wheels or pulleys, encode planetary constants into stone? This isn't coincidence. It's intention. Think of it like a tuning fork embedded in Earth's crust, built to resonate with the frequencies of the planet and perhaps beyond. Nikola Tesla, who dreamed of transmitting energy wirelessly across the globe, was fascinated by Egyptian temples and cosmic resonance. He believed the Earth itself could be used as a conductor, that we were surrounded by a sea of energy, waiting to be harnessed. Sound familiar? He designed the Wardenclyffe Tower, a structure whose coils and frequency chambers echo, in eerie ways, the internal layout of the pyramids. A tower not to broadcast information but power, not through wires but through resonance. Now ask yourself, is it so unlikely that an ancient civilization, older than dynastic Egypt, may have already discovered this? The pyramid is not a monument to death. It is a witness to power. Electromagnetic, acoustic, telluric. A machine that once pulsed with energy, humming silently beneath the desert sun. This idea isn't new. Theories have circulated for decades about pyramids as power plants. In the 1980s, engineer Christopher Dunn proposed the pyramid as a massive hydrogen generator, pointing out the wear on the stone shafts, the chemical residues in the Queen's chamber, and the absence of soot in passageways. A combustionless engine. An ancient reactor, and yet, no one speaks of this in schools. There are tunnels beneath the pyramids, sealed corridors and unfinished shafts. What are they hiding? Just architectural experiments? Or something else, conduits perhaps part of a broader system? Remember, in the world of machines, every void, every volume serves a function. Nothing is accidental. And then there's water. Beneath the Giza Plateau lie vast aquifers, slow subterranean rivers. The pyramid is built on top of these water channels, just as some megalithic sites in South America and Asia are constructed over underground currents. Water, conductor of vibration, amplifier of frequency, source of life. Could it be that the pyramid was part of a hydromechanical energy system? A generator not of electricity in our modern sense, but of something subtler: frequency, charge, life force. Esoteric traditions speak of prana, chi, orgone. Energies that modern science struggles to define but cannot ignore. The pyramid may not have been built to do anything in the crude mechanical sense. It may have been built to be something: a stabilizer, a balancer, a beacon. And if it once transmitted, what did it send? Not just power, information, intention, vibration, a resonance not for machines but for minds. Because you see, the most powerful energy is not electricity. It is consciousness. The ancients didn't separate mind from matter, spirit from stone. They believed, no, they knew that thought itself was a force, and that architecture could anchor it. When the Egyptians built temples, they weren't constructing places of worship in the modern sense. They were embedding language into form, geometry as scripture, vibration as memory, a structure that could hold intention over millennia. And the pyramid? That was the pinnacle of this principle. A structure so harmonically aligned that even in silence it speaks. Not in sound waves, but in presence. Why do so many feel altered inside it? Why do heart rates slow, breath deepens, thoughts dissolve? It's not just awe, it's resonance. Your nervous system tuning itself to something older than culture. Archaeologist Dr. Sarah Parcak, using satellite infrared imaging, uncovered hidden shafts and tunnels beneath the plateau, suggesting an entire subterranean network still unexplored. Why would the ancients hide chambers beneath a tomb? Why so many false doors, blocked passageways, and acoustic anomalies? The answers don't point to burial. They point to activation, to initiation. Think of this, across the ancient world, from Chichen Itza to Angkor Wat, pyramid-like structures were placed at precise latitude-longitude coordinates. Some aligned to solstices, others to star systems. Giza is aligned so precisely to Orion's belt that even NASA engineers admit the odds of it being accidental are infinitesimal. But what if it wasn't just symbolic? What if the pyramid was a map, not just of stars above, but of how to return to them? We measure time in numbers, but what if the ancients measured it in cycles? What if the pyramid wasn't only a structure of stone, but a clock of consciousness, tracking cosmic rhythms, planetary alignments, moments when energy or memory became more accessible? The Egyptians called them Zep Tepi the first time, the beginning of the great cycle, a moment when gods walked with men, or when man still remembered he was God. You don't need to believe in myth to see the echo of something extraordinary. Mainstream archaeology still teaches that the pyramids were built by thousands of laborers using copper tools and sledges. But engineers from MIT and physicists like Dr. Joseph Davidovits have shown that the techniques used suggest something entirely different, perhaps even geopolymer casting or acoustic levitation. Not fantasy, just forgotten technique. And that's the pattern, isn't it? Everywhere we look, the further back we go, the more advanced things seem to become. Perfectly drilled granite. Massive stones moved across impossible distances. Astronomical knowledge that rivals our own. What if progress isn't linear? What if history is cyclical? Like breath, like tide. Rising and falling, remembering and forgetting. Because maybe the greatest mystery of the pyramids isn't how they were built, but why we forgot what they were. Perhaps forgetting was part of it. Not a flaw in the story, but the story itself. A sacred amnesia written into the human path so that remembering would not just be intellectual but transformational. So that one day, in the echo of stone chambers and silent corridors, we would hear not the voices of the dead, but the voice of our own reawakening. The pyramid is not speaking to the past. It's speaking to you. Why else does it endure? Weathered but not broken, looted yet still sovereign. Through conquest, erosion, and empire it remains. Not as a relic, but as a teacher. Not as a monument to power, but as a vessel of presence. When you stand before it, something inside you straightens. You breathe differently. The body recognizes what the mind has forgotten. Many initiates, from Pythagoras to Napoleon, sought solitude inside its chambers. Not for study, for encounter. There are records, whispered and hidden, that speak of visions inside the king's chamber, of soundless frequencies, of time bending, of being shown who you are beneath who you think you are. Could that be its purpose? A chamber built not for death, but for resonance. A place where the frequency of the earth, the structure of the stars, and the consciousness of a prepared human being could harmonize. An amplifier of soul state, an accelerator of remembering. This aligns with what mystics and scientists alike have begun to uncover, that consciousness isn't produced by the brain, but received by it. Like a radio dial picking up a station. And in certain places, sacred geometries lay lines, resonant forms, that signal becomes clearer, stronger, undeniable. So what happens if the pyramid was designed not just to harness the energy of the earth, but to fine-tune the signal between matter and spirit? What if its function was not to preserve the body, but to awaken the soul? That would explain its silence. its refusal to give up secrets through excavation or theory. It's not meant to be understood from the outside. It's meant to be entered, felt, remembered. And as you hear these words, as your own breath synchronizes with something deeper, consider this. What if the reason no tomb was ever found is because the pyramid was never meant to hold the dead, but to wake the living? And once you begin to remember that, everything shifts. Because then the question isn't what was the pyramid, but what is it still doing? Even now, in silence, beneath layers of tourism and misinterpretation, it stands in full alignment with Orion, with Sirius, with the electromagnetic grid of the planet. With you, the stones haven't forgotten, the geometry hasn't dimmed, the code still runs. The ancient builders didn't work in stone alone, they worked in frequency. And they understood what we are only beginning to rediscover. That frequency is the architecture of reality. That vibration builds form. That matter is frozen music. The pyramid is not an object. It is a chord, a living equation, a sustained note between dimensions. This is why standing within it often triggers something beyond thought. Memory not as recollection but as resonance. A vibrational knowing that doesn't pass through logic, but through the bones. As if your cells are tuning in. As if your body recognizes the pattern because it, too, was built by the same forces. And perhaps that is not metaphor. Modern science now confirms that the body, the brain, the DNA all emit measurable electromagnetic fields. The heart, in particular, radiates a frequency that can synchronize with others. And ancient traditions knew this long before sensors and charts. They designed temples to amplify that coherence, to center the pulse of a seeker within the greater rhythm of the cosmos. This is the core of the Hermetic axiom. As above, so below. As within, so without. The pyramid, in its very proportions, enacts this law. The microcosm and macrocosm mirrored. It is not just a shape, it is a principle in form. A synthesis of earth and star, mass and spirit. And yet we called it a tomb, because we forgot how to hear silence. Because we stopped trusting the knowledge that moves through feeling. Because we believed the only truths were written in books, not carved in light or echoed in stone. But the pyramid doesn't ask for belief. It waits. It listens. And maybe that's why you're here now, not by chance or curiosity, but because something inside you is already tuned to this frequency. You're not learning. You're remembering. Not decoding history, but decoding yourself. You didn't come for facts alone. You came to feel what they've tried to bury, that deep beneath the sand, beneath the theories and textbooks and timelines, the truth was never lost. It was simply buried. And now, like the sun rising in alignment over the stone horizon, it returns. Quietly, unstoppably, in you. There are no signs pointing to it, no plaques revealing its purpose, no voices rising from the corridors saying this is what it means. Because the pyramid was never built to explain itself, it was built to be experienced. And experience is the one thing modern inquiry can't replicate. Can measure vibrations, chart alignments, scan structures with radar, and still it stands there unchanged, unclaimed. Because the pyramid is not a riddle to be solved, but a threshold to be crossed. Not an answer, but a mirror. What you see depends on who you are when you look. And so it draws in the seeker century after century. Engineers, mystics, military men, archaeologists, wanderers, each searching for something power, proof, mystery, themselves, each leaving with more questions than they came with. Because the pyramid doesn't give answers. It gives invitation. What if it was built by a civilization far older than we acknowledge? Not 4,500 years ago, but before the last great flood, before history, as we know it, even began. Evidence suggests the Sphinx may predate dynastic Egypt by thousands of years. Its weathering patterns inconsistent with desert erosion, but perfectly aligned with heavy rainfall. Something that last touched the Giza Plateau over 10,000 years ago. And if that's true, then the entire story we've been told begins to unravel. What if the builders were the survivors of a previous age, one of heightened knowledge, spiritual science, and planetary balance? An age that fell not because it was primitive, but because it misused the very forces it once understood. An echo of Atlantis. An echo of us. They left behind a message, not in language, not in prophecy, but in form. The pyramid endures because form transcends translation. It cannot be erased, cannot be revised. It speaks through resonance, not rhetoric. And it waits in stillness for the moment when consciousness once again rises to meet it. That moment is not in the distant future. It's here. We are returning to what was buried, not by sand, but by systems. By education that replaced wonder with fact. By science that forgot the soul. By cultures that feared the quiet power of inward knowing. But the veil is thinning. All around the world, people are being drawn to ancient places with new eyes. Not as tourists, but as rememberers. They feel it in their skin, in their dreams, in the ache that something essential is missing. And that something might be not a what, but a when. A time before forgetting. A frequency still alive in stone. And you, being here now, reading this, feeling what you feel, you are part of that remembering. So maybe the pyramid was never meant to explain itself because its true function was to activate something in you. Not a thought, but a state. A harmonic, waiting for the right moment, for the right receiver to ring again. That's the quiet brilliance of its design. It does nothing obvious. And yet, it changes everything. It doesn't speak in facts, but in frequency. And you feel it in places language can't reach. In the stillness that settles behind your eyes, in the pulse of something ancient rising through your chest, in the subtle knowing that all of this, has been with you all along. Science is slowly catching up to what the ancients once lived. That consciousness is not a product of the brain. That thought affects matter. That memory is not stored only in cells, but in fields, invisible, magnetic, collective. The akashic, the morphic, the resonant. The pyramid fits into all of them, not as a curiosity, but as a keystone. And the moment you see it not as a question, but as a signal, everything begins to shift. History becomes less of a record and more of a rhythm. Truth becomes less of a claim and more of a feeling. The need to prove dissolves because something inside you already knows. This isn't about belief. It's about coherence. That's why the pyramid still works. It works not because it's understood, but because it remembers. And when you enter its field, even through words, even from afar, you begin to remember too. Your own shape, your own source, the deep order beneath the noise. So the question that's left isn't what was the pyramid for? It's, what are you for? Because if they built machines from stone that could hold the frequency of life, what could you build, knowing that you are made of the same? And maybe, just maybe, remembering the pyramid is how we begin to remember ourselves. And now here you are, not in a desert, not in stone, but in a space between thought and memory, between what you've been told and what you've always known. You didn't arrive here through a doorway. You tuned in, to this moment, to this frequency, to yourself. The pyramid was never about the past. It is a technology of the now, a mirror placed in the desert so that one day, When the forgetting had run its course, a generation would stand before it and remember not who built it, but why it still calls. We tried to name it tomb, monument, temple, mystery, but perhaps its name isn't something you pronounce. It's something you feel, like a low pulse under the skin of the world, a hum beneath history, a geometry that keeps echoing long after the tools are gone. That hum is growing louder. More people are waking up not just to facts but to frequencies. You feel it in the way time bends, how synchronicities multiply, how the world begins to speak in symbols instead of noise. The pyramid doesn't rise to answer our questions. It rises to ask a greater one. Will you remember who you are, even when the world tells you to forget? Because this was never about ancient Egypt. It was about the technology of your own being. The pyramid is your nervous system aligned with the cosmos. Your breath synchronized with sacred form. Your consciousness shaped like light slowed into matter. The builders are not behind you. They are within you. And as we move into a new age, where frequency is the new frontier, where sound, vibration, magnetism, and intention become the next science, the pyramid is no longer just a monument to marvel at. It is a manual, and its activation doesn't require permission, only presence. So if this reached you, it's not just because of curiosity. It's because a part of you, the part they tried to bury, was never asleep. It was waiting. And now that you've heard the signal, what will you do with it? If this message stirred something real in you, support this awakening. Subscribe to the channel so we can keep building this field of remembering. Share this message with someone you feel is ready to hear it. And in the comments, tell me, what do you feel the pyramids still hold for us? And what, in this moment, are you ready to remember? Let's turn this channel into a resonance chamber. Your voice matters here. You matter here. This is only the beginning.